in the chat right now. And just as a reminder, as you watch the panel tonight, please, if you have questions for our guests, please drop them in the chat in Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. Got a great line of speakers tonight. First off, we'll have the DC representative to the Congress, Rep. Eleanor Holmes Norton. Following up that, we'll have Anise Jenkins from Free DC. We'll have Bo Schuff from the Executive Director of DC Vote. And we'll finally be wrapping up with Stasha Rhodes, campaign manager for 51 for 50. All great groups advocating for DC statehood. We'll also be hearing from the chair of Our Revolution DC about ways you can get involved with the chapter as the months go by. Hello, Adriana. My name is, for those who don't know, I'm Zach Nunez. I'm on the steering committee for Our Revolution DC. I'm also on the endorsement committee. I've been a DC resident for 15 years. I'm originally from San Diego, California. I'm a graduate of George Washington University. For our newcomers, I'll say, please drop your name and where you're from in the chat. Welcome to our Revolution DC February meeting. We are currently in the middle of our membership drive for the month of February. Hello, Jasmine, Yoga District. If you're interested in joining DC, Our Revolution DC, I'll drop a link in the chat. We're in the middle of our February membership drive, trying to get things started in the new year here. Oops. There's the link. If you have any questions that come in your mind while we're going through our panel, please drop them in the Zoom Q&A or in the comments on Facebook. Hello, all new attendees. Please drop your name and where you're from in the chat. Hello, Tarsha from Capitol Hill. So you've got we're really excited about our lineup of speakers tonight. I hope everyone is excited as we are. Hello, Janelle from Arizona. Thanks for joining us tonight. Yona from Silver Spring, welcome. Good to see you all. If you have any questions for the speakers tonight, please drop them in the Zoom Q&A or the comments on Facebook. Hello, Eleanor, DC Statehood Coalition. Martin and Carolyn, Capitol Hill since 1968. Welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. just a reminder for all our newcomers, we're in the middle of our February membership drive. You can join at the link in the chat. And now we're ready to start the show. I'll hand it over to our Revolution DC Chair, Deepika Bhandari, tonight's host.
Thank you so much, Zach. Can you hear me, by the way?
We do.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Zach. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our DC call. As Zach mentioned, I am the chair of the DC chapter of Our Revolution, and we are co-hosting with Our Revolution National, our parent organization. We are a progressive grassroots organization spearheaded by Senator Bernie Sanders after the 2016 election, committed to the goal of endorsing progressive candidates, pushing for progressive legislation and reform, and supporting progressive activism. Some of our major issues that we have been focusing on are topics like Medicare for All and DC statehood, which is actually the topic of our panel today. Although we are located at the seat of the federal government, our issues, people, and representation are overlooked, ranging from proper federal representation to being shortchanged with the coronavirus stimulus package to significant corruption and red tape on the local level in dealing with issues such as healthcare, housing, and racial equality. We can definitely see the evidence of, all of these issues that we face because DC is not a state with the January 6th riots as well. This is why we want DC statehood to help elevate progressive voices that will fight for us and our rights. So we have an amazing panel today to sort of discuss the purpose of statehood and why it's so important to bring awareness to it and what we can do to help support statehood with Representative Norton, who is our congressional representative for the District of Columbia, and our amazing local activists, Stasha Rhodes, Anise Jenkins, and Bo Shuff. So, but before I get started, I just want to first turn it over to Hal Ginsberg of Our Revolution National.
Thank you so much, Deepika, and I really, really enjoy being on these calls. DC is an awesome group, and I'm really just happy to be part of it and work with you guys. Yeah, we are in the midst of our membership drive. You can see the really nice card you get. So if you get a chance, we'd love to have you join as a sustaining member. That's ourrev.us/DCMem, ourrev.us/DCMem. And you can probably hear me typing. I've always been told I'm a very loud typist, but I can't mute it while I'm talking, obviously. So if you get a chance, we'd love to have you become a sustaining member. We know times are tough. So this is for folks who that you can afford it, obviously. We're not asking you to reach into your pocket if it's not full. And in fact, that is a real problem that we're facing. We are fighting for economic justice across the country. There's our 4-point plan to win. Now that we have dumped Trump, we did defeat Trump. The time has come to pivot to the White House, to Congress, and we are holding Biden accountable. And we are pushing, for example, to insist on a big enough COVID relief package. That includes that $15 minimum wage that Biden apparently now is backtracking on, or appears to be. We're fighting hard to keep it. We're fighting hard for that student debt relief. Too many young folks and many, on all of our calls have told us that they are starting life with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They may never get out of it. Parents, now we are seeing generations with student debt, moms, dads, and their kids. It's just wrong. And we're fighting against that in every way possible. There's your Biden accountable. Now we're also fighting to fix the Senate and the filibuster. ourrev.us/fixit. ourrev.us/fixit. And I'm hoping we can get that in the chat as well. Because obviously now I'm speaking, so it's a little bit more challenging at other points. We are asking you, as I mentioned, we are hoping you'll become a 2021 member at ourrev.us/DCMem. and that is for $5 or more per month. We have elected so many great progressives across the country. You see there at the top, Senator Nina Turner. Maryland has a call with Senator Nina Turner. She's running for Congress in the 11th District of Ohio. Senator Nina Turner will be with us Wednesday, the 24th, 1 week from tonight. We hope you can be on that call. And she'll be joined by Cori Bush, new squad member whom we endorsed. I'm not sure if her picture's on there, but we definitely supported her. So glad to elect Cori Bush to join the squad. She'll be with us next week. We're phone banking for Senator Nina Turner. We'll tell you how to help do that. In fact, I'll tell you now, ourrev.us/call the digit 4, call 4 Nina. I mentioned pass the minimum wage. I mentioned cancel student debt. That's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting to transform the party. And one way to transform the party, by the way, is with DC statehood. DC residents, and you know this, Anise Jenkins knows this, Stasha Rhodes knows this, Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton knows this. You don't have a Congress person with a vote. You don't have 2 senators. And that means that we progressives are fighting with an arm behind our back, because the District of Columbia is a very progressive jurisdiction when it comes to voting. And with those Democrats who would be, we believe, to the left of the average Democrat, we would be seeing a more vibrant, a more progressive, a more impactful Democratic Party. That's why we need DC statehood. Beyond, it's just simply a human rights issue. It's simply a human rights issue. So there it is, one more time, our membership card. It's a beautiful card designed by Our Revolution artist, Lauren Rowling. And you get that card when you give the $5 a month. So we ask you to go to ourrev.us/DCMem. And I believe with that, I'm going to go right back to our chair in DC. And I've had such a great experience working with Deepika Bhandari. She has done such a tremendous job with this organization. So I'm really, really happy to give the microphone back to her. Deepika, to you.
Thank you for such a lovely reintroduction, Hal. Very kind of you. So let's actually get right to it. I am really excited to introduce our first speaker, who is Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton for Washington, D.C. She is a longtime advocate for D.C. statehood, as well as other progressive issues in Congress. A third-generation Washingtonian, Congresswoman Norton is currently serving her 15th term for DC, is the chair of the House Subcommittee on Highways and Transit, and additionally serves on the Committee on Oversight and Reform and Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. She has devoted her service in fighting for full congressional voting representation and full democracy for DC, and continues her lifelong struggle for universal human and civil rights. Everyone, please welcome Representative Holmes Norton.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to Our Revolution on DC statehood, and very much appreciate the support you've given to DC statehood. I want to bring you up to date on where we are.
Please
the
do.
House passed the bill overwhelmingly in June, and now. And that was a landmark passage because that was the first time either chamber of Congress had passed the bill. And now we are about to pass the bill again. And when I say again, understand that with a bill of this breadth, it will be impossible to pass it in one session of Congress. But we are looking much bolder this year because we this year have a president and a vice president who support DC statehood, and we control the House and the Senate. So we're intending to make even greater progress this year. We already have 211. We already have 211 co-sponsors, you only need 218 to pass. So we are assured of passing the bill this time. I want our revolution to know that when I first came to Congress in 1991, I did get a vote on D.C. statehood, got 60% of the Democrats and one Republican voting for the bill. So why didn't we get it? It's because the reason we controlled the House at that time is because of Southern Democrats. And Southern Democrats were good Democrats on many issues, but not on D.C. statehood. So when I first came to Congress, I was able to get a vote, but I was not able to get it passed. And then since I've been in Congress, I have been mostly in the minority, which is why last June was the first time we could get a statehood bill passed. It's good to be in the majority. The Speaker of the House has spoken out, and that's rare. The Speaker does not speak on bills, but she has spoken out on D.C. statehood. If I could quote one of the lines that she said in her statement, Democrats will once again bring Congresswoman Norton's crucial legislation to the floor as we fight to secure access to the ballot box for Washingtonians, for historically disadvantaged communities, and for all Americans. And we will not stop until that right is a reality for all. That's only part of the statement she made in support of D.C. statehood. The majority leader is an original co-sponsor of the D.C. statehood bill. We should not have to make the case for D.C. statehood. We have more residents than 2 states. We have about the same number of residents as 7 states. Our budget is larger than that of 12 states. We have a bond rating that is higher than that of 35 states. We have a higher personal income per person and gross domestic product than any state. I've just given you some of the reasons why D.C. qualifies for statehood, in case anybody's wondering what the qualifications are. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have now. That's a once over of where we are on statehood, making great progress.
Thank you so much for thank you so much for that, Representative Norton. Before we get started with the questions, I actually have one of my own. So, how you have been fighting for statehood, like you said, since you've been in Congress since '91. And how have you seen, and you've been so tenacious with advocating for it, even though you were in the minority for so long. So how in your view, have recent events such as, Trump's presidency, the pandemic, and the January 6th riots, how do you think that has sort of brought awareness to statehood and just how important it is for us and for the District of Columbia?
Well, I think it has brought increased awareness. We couldn't even call out our own National Guard because because my bill hadn't passed to give D.C. control over its National Guard. But in holding back the National Guard, you see that the Capitol was overrun, and we're locked out of the Capitol for that reason. I emphasize the difference between statehood and home rule. We can get control over our own National Guard with home rule, but statehood would give us control of everything. It would give us the same rights as the states have, for example, to call out the National Guard and to do what they please without any congressional interference. Every year, I have to defeat, usually I do, defeat bills put in by Republicans to overturn to overturn DC's laws that they don't approve. This is a progressive jurisdiction, so you can imagine that Republicans wouldn't approve of many of our laws. That's not their business. Statehood would free us from that. As it is now, without statehood, I simply have to defeat those bills or keep them from coming up on the House floor.
Wow, thank you so much. That is, your tenacity is quite inspiring, and I think more and more people are finally beginning to understand and recognize your efforts in fighting for statehood for so long, and just how crucial it is for us, given the consequences that we have faced especially in the last year. So thank you for that. Diego or Zach, do we have any questions in the comments for Representative Norton?
We do. One question that we did receive from Darren was whether there is support, I guess, for statehood for Puerto Rico as well.
That's a good question. You would think that since states have usually gotten statehood by being paired, and Puerto Rico does have a significant number of Republicans. Unfortunately, Puerto Rico, unlike the District of Columbia, is insolvent. So you cannot become a state if you are insolvent. Puerto Rico has had mixed views on becoming a state. They don't have all of the rights of the states, but they also don't pay federal income taxes. So they have been of two minds. I believe their latest iteration has been for statehood. But again, considering where they are, remember in the Caribbean, it has been very difficult for Puerto Rico simply to keep itself going. And it is now heavily dependent on the federal government. So at the moment, they are not a viable partner for statehood for the District of Columbia.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very important answer. I believe we have a question from Sheena Gardner asking, quote, "We know that Republicans will try to cite the Constitution. Will we need 60 Senate votes for statehood? And if so, will we have any other options? Will 51 votes work for the Senate?" Unquote.
Well, there's an organization called 51 for 51, HR 51 they are referring to. Typically, you do need 60 votes to pass a bill. And I do want to know there's even some hope of that. The reason that the Senate took some time to organize this year is because of the filibuster. Now, we've eliminated the filibuster for most reasons. You can't filibuster judges, for example, as you could in the past. But you can still filibuster legislation. The Democrats, who now control the Senate, were so intent upon getting rid of the filibuster that they delayed for several weeks the organization necessary to get the Senate going. So that gives me some hope that the filibuster is on its last legs. I should indicate that one of the reasons is, and it has to do with a lot of things having nothing to do with statehood. Last session, under control of the Republicans, they did not pass any legislation, or virtually none. They essentially dealt with the confirmation of judges, and only that. We had more than 400 bills passed in the House. Some of them were bipartisan. Virtually none of them passed. So the Senate is in for a real reorganization. And that can help a lot of legislation, but certainly DC statehood.
That's a great straight answer. And definitely it's always uh, uh, heartening to hear it be said straight like that. Now we did have one final question from Ashley asking. This is not quite a statehood question, but if you had any information on what is the status on the Capitol perimeter. For those of us who live close, it is an eyesore and a royal pain to navigate around. Do we have
The
plans on
Capitol
tearing
what?
this down? The Capitol perimeter, wall.
She's talking about the Capitol fence.
Yeah, the Capitol fence. Yes.
I have introduced a bill. This is an outrage. We need it for the moment because the Capitol Police didn't do their job. They had access to a dozen different federal police that could have done a great deal to keep these people from climbing the walls to get to the Capitol. So what we're left with is this fence. It offends the residents of the District of Columbia, particularly those who live close to the Capitol, as I do. I live 9 blocks from the Capitol, on Capitol Hill. And you go a certain distance, you can't get any further still. I think that's because we're still hearing chatter. But frankly, I think these people have had it. They were egged on by Trump himself. I'm sure they have dissipated, but the chatter is keeping this fence going for the time being. My bill is aimed at making sure that when it goes absolutely and all of it. That is a resident who knows how outrageous it is to have our Capitol and the entire Capitol complex surrounded by a fence. Fencing was used 10,000 years ago, has been used for 10,000 years. There are state-of-the-art ways to keep the Capitol safe. For example, the president has already stopped building the fence at the border. And the reason he's done that is because there are state-of-the-art ways to keep people from crossing the border. If we can do that at the border, we can surely do that in the nation's capital.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that question too, because it's my bill, and it's from a resident who understands how unsightly that is. So thank you very much.
Absolutely,
okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Diego.
we have several other questions, but I think we'll move on right now, and if there's time later, we can always bring those to the other panelists as well.
Well, I've enjoyed talking with you this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Representative Norton. We really appreciate your time, and for you giving us an update and fighting for us. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, and good night.
Good night. All right, so it was wonderful to have her. And now I'm going to go ahead and just introduce our next guest. She is Stasha Rhodes. She's the campaign director of 51 for 51, which is a pro-DC statehood coalition of groups fighting for equal rights and representation for DC residents. Her previous work includes managing and executing national and local campaigns as director of engagement at Giffords, a leading organization against gun violence. She is also the director of advocacy for guns and crime policy at the Center for American Progress, and served as the founder and principal of the Red Team LLC, an advocacy firm specializing in issue campaign management, grassroots organizing, and government affairs. Welcome, Stasha, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I know, you're actually joining us for the first time on one of our calls, and we're really excited to have you. So I just wanted to first start by getting a sense of what 51 for 51 is about, and what your We Can't Wait campaign is about, and then we'll go from there.
Totally. Thank you so much, Our Revolution, for having me. It's an honor to be here, especially to join my statehood colleagues, Bo and Anise, and of course, Congresswoman Norton. We certainly, 51 for 51 comes to this fight within the most recent years and have only been able to be as successful because of the folks on this call. So it's always good to join them. 51 for 51 is a national DC statehood campaign fighting to make DC the 51st state with 51 votes in the Senate. In other words, bypassing the Senate filibuster. A number of folks have talked about the filibuster. I saw the question in the chat about 51 votes. We decided, we sort of see this work, I guess, in two main buckets. One is the issue of statehood itself and all the things that surround the importance of making DC a state. And then the second bucket is how. How will DC actually become a state? And we made the strategy of how a core part of our advocacy campaign. And for us, the reality is that there is no way DC can become a state without bypassing the filibuster and making sure it goes through the Senate with 51 votes. And I think, we started this 2 years ago. People thought we were insane. And now here we are, the filibuster is at the forefront of a lot of conversations. And so, we really have been sort of talking about why, if you're going to change the rules for anything, you should certainly change the rules so that 700,000 people have access to the democracy that surrounds them. Congresswoman Norton mentioned it. In the past, the Senate has changed the rules to allow 51 votes for particular things. One of the most popular pieces is judges. Mitch McConnell has sort of spearheaded the change so that 51 votes is enough to confirm a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court. In that same vein, it should certainly be enough to ensure that over 700,000 residents have a vote in Congress and become a state. So that's our main sort of around this, of course, supporting all the efforts locally with our but I guess another key thing too, and then I'll stop because I think Dupaka has some questions. But I guess one other thing that's really important for us is that there is this growing conversation, this growing false narrative around what DC statehood is about. And you hear from Republicans that this is just a power grab for Democrats while they're in power. They just want to get as much power as possible. And we really believe that it's important to amplify the fact that this is a civil rights fight. This is a fight for freedom, as Anise so aptly puts, this is a fight to free DC and give them the rightfully deserved rights that they have as citizens of Washington, DC. And so we're working really hard to tamp down the false narrative that this is a power grab and to elevate the fact that this is about social justice and it's and we lean heavily on our young advocates who are born and raised in DC. I think one thing that I think I have sort of get emotional about is when I hear the young advocates that we work with who are from DC, who sort of live in the shadows of the Capitol and all the monuments and the mall, say that, my mom fought for statehood, her mom fought for statehood. Right now, we have a really good opportunity to ensure that I'm the last generation to fight for this. And so I'm certainly empowered by those young people that I'm surrounded by. Grateful to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Stasha. I love that you mentioned how you and so many other DC activists like Miss Anise and so many others in DC have been fighting for a very long time. And, you guys were written out and considered crazy as well. And, also having to deal with the challenge of combating the growing false narrative of DC statehood just trying to be a power grab for Democrats and, it not needing federal representation because it was meant to be just the federal capital and all these sorts of other narratives as well. Especially because I think what we're seeing here in recent months and years is a sort of awareness about statehood. I mean, even just a year ago, people didn't even understand what that meant and why that was important. So, in your view, what do you think is the best way to, especially people who are not from the DC, who don't understand why this is important? What is the best way to bring about awareness, in your view, um, in terms of why statehood is important? Uh, and do you think like maybe talking about recent events that have happened, like the riots and pandemic, and sort of the consequences of not having statehood is effective? Or what do you think is the most important thing for us to spread awareness? For us to spread awareness?
Yeah. I'll say a couple things. One is that I think for us, what has been effective is to take the narrative and the messaging outside of Washington, D.C. You're right, and Congresswoman Norton has often said this, that most people outside of the county, what it means for D.C. not to be a state, and so we important to travel to states and do advocacy and pay for ads, do a number of things outside of DC to ensure people understand what it means. When most people think about DC, they think of the Capitol, they think of the White House, and they think of the mall and all the things that go along with that, the monuments and so on. They don't often think about the folks who live in the shadows of that, who are not politicians, who are not members of the press, who are not lobbyists, but who are teachers and doctors and librarians and postal service workers who pay federal taxes and who are denied representation in Congress. And we feel like it has been a part of our responsibility to shine a light on those folks and talk about the real people who live in DC. I think in saying that, it's so important for me to say that if it were just a place with lobbyists and members of the press and politicians, they too deserve representation in Congress. That the Constitution doesn't have a carve out for certain people to have full rights. And so really we've spent time doing that education. I think another piece that we tried to take outside of Washington to message on is that, and I saw this on one of yours earlier, is that the Senate is broken. Mm-hmm. The Senate is a deeply undemocratic mess. I think that the 50 Democratic senators will represent 40 million more Americans than the 50 Republican senators. I think that epitomizes the structural inequities in the Senate. Adding 2 more senators from DC is a start to making the Senate more representative. But honestly, there needs to be far more structural change to have it reflect America. This is certainly a key start. And then the third thing for us is the racial justice aspect of this. DC's population of over 700,000 residents is 46% Black. If DC is granted statehood, it would be the only state in the nation to have a plurality of Black residents. That's important to us. Black Americans have had to fight for every single piece of access to democracy. And here we are in 2021, still fighting for a huge piece of that pie. For me, that part deeply resonates. I'm not from DC. I'm originally from Louisiana. My grandparents were sharecroppers. My father grew up on a sugarcane plantation. I know exactly what that fight for democracy, that fight for representation is like. And that certainly empowers my work and the people that I work with to ensure that we're a part of the conversation, that we're able to sort of end this stain on our democracy.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Stasha. I really appreciate it. I think, Diego, we have a few questions. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions for Ms. Stasha before we move on to our next speaker.
Hello, Deepika. We have a few, but many of them have already been covered. I apologize. There are a few questions, but that have already been asked.
Okay.
So.
Well, If that's the case, we can still ask them, and we just have your point of view, Ms. Dasha. That's.
I do see one of them that maybe if it's okay for me to hop in and just answer it, because I do
Please
think
do.
it's an important.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So the one question that I see is, are you saying DC statehood can get before the Senate under reconciliation? That's how we'll only need 51 Senate votes instead of the filibuster imposed on 60. So our view, I should say the campaign's view, is that it is likely impossible for the parliamentarian to say that DC statehood would be included in reconciliation. There's a thing called the Byrd Rule, and the Byrd Rule sort of restricts things from being included in reconciliation that are not budgetary items. It is really hard for us to see DC being included in reconciliation. For example, there's a lot of conversation right now about minimum wage. Seems like a very pure budgetary thing, but it will likely not pass the Byrd Rule. So from our perspective, the way to get to 51 votes is that majority here, the Democrats, will need to sort of change the rule so that 51 votes is enough for statehood, and that the Byrd Rule will not suffice for reconciliation.
Awesome. Thank you for informing us, Ms. Dasha. And Diego, do we have any other questions? If not, I have another one of my own.
You can go ahead, Deepika.
All right. So, Ms. Dasha, how can we support 51 for 51, your campaign and your efforts to bypass filibuster or, towards statehood? Can we put pressure, especially for people who may not be on this call, that may not necessarily be from DC? Would it be impactful at all to, for example, put pressure on our representatives, on our congressmen and women, to take part in letter campaigns, or just simply to bring awareness and combat the false narratives that we talked about before? And do you have any links that you would like to share? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I would say like the best way to support us is to go to 51for51.org and sign up so that you can take action and directly contact your senator. I think there's one sort of specific nuance, is that our campaign is we're not only asking senators to support DC statehood, we know a number of them do, but we're asking is to change the rules to actually pass the legislation. And so if you're able to sign up on our website, you can contact your specific senator. I think for folks, as I see in the comment, that we know we need to push a little harder on, specifically, not maybe saying any names, but Arizona and West Virginia, it'd be really to get a bit more of a push. I saw someone in the chat earlier is from Arizona. Last weekend, I believe on Sunday, Arizona celebrated 109 years of being a state. It would be incredible if folks contact Senator Sinema and Senator Kelly to say the folks in DC also deserve statehood, just like the Arizona have enjoyed for 109 years. The best way here is to really just pressure your congressmen and women, especially your senators, to support DC becoming a state with 51 votes in the Senate.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And do we have time for one more question? A quick one? Hal?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. And just one more question, just a quick one, Ms. Dasha. You previously, as I mentioned when I introduced you, you've worked a lot with gun violence and working and organizing against gun violence. A question actually is how does that relate to the work that you did with working against gun violence? How does that relate to statehood, especially in DC? That's actually a really interesting question that someone just messaged me.
Yeah, look, I think it's an important question that we often sort of highlight through 51 for 51. DC locally actually has really good gun laws, probably as best as possible as they can have without being a state. The issue, though, is that DC still has relatively high gun violence rates, and that's because neighboring states have poor gun violence prevention laws. And there is no federal trafficking law, so there is no law that governs how guns move across state lines. If DC had two senators, they help fight for gun trafficking laws and help protect themselves from neighboring bad laws. There's a recent trace data. The ATF does tracing data. It recently showed that most crime guns that come into DC come from other states. And one of the things that could help protect DC is a federal trafficking law. The other thing that I will say too is that Congresswoman Norton mentioned that the House continuously passes, I think the last session, 400 bills. One of the bills was HR 8 with background checks. I think this is such a fascinating thing. Background checks is incredibly popular across our country. 96%, which is insane. You can't find 96% of Americans to agree on anything. 96% of Americans support universal background checks. And if DC had two senators, they would be able to help to enact that through the Senate and be able to sort of push against things like Mitch McConnell holding it up back when it was passed. Now we have a trifecta, so hopefully Dems will have the courage to be able to pass the bipartisan background checks bill. But I think, like many issues, having DC have a voice in the Senate and the House and a vote in the Senate and the House is incredibly important to a number of issues, certainly for gun violence prevention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sasha. And that actually is a great example of how passing statehood affects and addresses so many of the other issues that we face, and helps with them, such as gun violence, as well as healthcare and just representation in general. So thank you again so much, Ms. Sasha. Really appreciate you having you here. So
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Good talking to you.
Of course. And now we're just going to move on to our next guest. She has actually been on our previous statehood panel before. I am really excited to welcome Ms. Anise Jenkins. She is a native Washingtonian executive director and one of the most recognizable faces of the Stand Up Free DC Statehood Now movement, which was founded in 1997 to educate the public about the need for full democratic rights and equality for the District of Columbia. She is also a proud graduate of Howard University. Welcome, Anise, and thank you so much for joining us again this time. Hi, Miss Anise, are you there?
Our organization, Stand Up for Democracy in DC, which a lot of people call Free DC, was founded in 1997 because of the takeover of Congress of all local government of the District of Columbia, except Parks and Recreation. A lot of us did not know that this could happen in DC. We didn't know that we were such subjects of the Congress. We didn't know the Congress had such power over us, but it did, and they took over our local government. Our mayor did not have any power. Our financial activities did not have any say-so. Our government did not have any say-so. They took over everything but Parks and Recreation. And what we're doing is making sure that never happens again. We want DC to be a state. We had been told that we had 4 twos in DC, which were 2 Black, 2 urban, 2 progressive, and 2 Democrat. Well, we say we can do that. We can be that if we want to be that. That should have nothing to do with our basic rights of representation, because we pay the highest federal taxes per person in the country. And we're going to continue to fight for statehood until we get it. We're reaching out with our members across the country to make sure that our members get in touch with their representatives, their senators, and their congresspeople who control DC, and get them to vote for DC statehood legislation, to vote for HR 51 and S 51 to make DC the 51st state of the Union. We will become Frederick Douglass Commonwealth. And we are determined to get those rights.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Anise. So actually, the last time you were with us on the Statehood on our panel, you talked a little bit about Free DC, Stand Up for DC, and the history of your activism and how it is so closely tied to, I mean, it is part of the civil rights movement. How do you feel, like from your perspective, we've discussed this a little bit today, but how do you feel from your perspective, how activism for statehood and for other issues in DC, how has that changed in terms of the urgency with the residents, and also in terms of like the consequences that the residents have faced here because of not having statehood? Do you see a change in people's mindsets or, you know, ability to recognize the issues?
Well, I must say that DC has gone through a period of gentrification where we went from up to about 70% Black population, and we're below 50% at this time. But I don't think it has really affected our commitment to the civil rights issue, because the people that have come into DC are from other states where they had representation, where they could respond to requests, get in touch with your congressperson if you want to have say-so over this issue, which we cannot do and which they cannot do living in the District of Columbia. It hasn't really changed. I would say that people that come from states really realize the effect of the lack of statehood has had on their existence. We were talking about the fence that has been constructed around the Capitol building. One really interesting thing is the chair of our DC local council has said that we have had trouble introducing, transmitting some of the legislation that has been passed by our Congress, which is our democratically, small d, democratically elected local government. We have to transfer this legislation to the Congress for its approval. It's really ridiculous to say we can't get beyond that fence to give the Congress our local legislation. It's absurd. Why should we have to do that? No other local government in this country has to do that. Why do we have to look at Congress as our masses, as if we were on a plantation? They are treating DC residents as slave residents, as slave plantation residents. And there's no reason why we shouldn't fight that. We have to continue to fight until we get the equal rights that we pay for, that we deserve as American citizens. We deserve full citizenship in the United States of America. Full citizenship rights are deserved by DC residents.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anise. That we do. And I find it really interesting how you mentioned that the residents, even though the nature of DC is very transient, like the city is so much of the population is very transient, and we have issues with gentrification, there are still a lot of people that come in as new residents and realize that they lack all these rights that they used to have in their other states, and then they realize, oh wow, this is affecting me. This is and then they realize, I guess, the importance of statehood. So that's a really great point, and I think we can use that to our advantage in terms of bringing awareness to statehood and why it's so important that we have rights and as well, and we can also use that as a talking point for other territories, like we mentioned earlier, Puerto Rico. So thank you so much for that. Diego, I wanted to know if we had any questions for Miss Anise in the chat.
Yes, we do. We had a question in regards to, do we have any Republican Senate co-sponsors on Sen Res 51?
No, not one Republican co-sponsor on the bill, not one. And it's disgraceful because this is the party of Lincoln. This is the party that emancipated the enslaved people in 1865. What happened to the Republican Party? Is this an example of white supremacy? The people that took over the Capitol, that invaded our Capitol, is that what's going on? The Republican Party should be embarrassed. The Republican Party has made DC statehood a partisan issue, which it is not. It's not a partisan issue. It's a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue. And it's really, they should be embarrassed. I would think a Republican Party member should be embarrassed that they are treating statehood as a partisan issue.
Now, thank you very much for that answer. I think that's definitely a lot of agreement on that. There's also the additional question in regards to safety and security for DC residents. Some people are asking, would a governor of DC had been able to keep the district more secure on January 6th as opposed to mayor?
Yes, I really believe so. Our mayor cannot act as a governor because she's not a governor of a state. When the insurrection occurred at the Capitol, she could not call out our National Guard, which could have enforced the protection of the Capitol. You could see Eugene Goodman running up the steps of the Capitol, diverting Mitch Romney, some Republican members of Congress, leading the crowd away from the senators as they were meeting. If our mayor was a governor, she could have called for reinforcements for the Capitol Hill Police, and she could have called for reinforcements for the National Guard. That's a perfect example, and that's why statehood has gotten on the front burner of the issues being discussed now. We need more control of our local government.
Thank you very much. And we're ready to move on, I guess, back to the Pika.
Yes, thank you so much, Diego. Thank you, Miss Anise, for your time. Guys, please follow her on Twitter. She's very active there, and also please follow Stand Up for DC, I believe. Is that correct?
Actually, it's www.freedc.org.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Someone please put that in the chat for me. And please also follow Miss Anise on Twitter. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you and all your years of activism. You are amazing.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. And now we'll move on to our final speaker. So I'm really excited to introduce Mr. Bo Shuff. He is the executive director of DC Vote, an organization that envisions a fairer America where residents of the nation's capital are first-class citizens. This will be evidenced by the District of Columbia gaining the freedom to control its own budget, pass its own laws without congressional interference, and having its citizens enjoy equal representation in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate. Bo is a veteran political and organizational strategist with a focus on field and outreach development, who has been working with progressive candidates and organizations to build capacity, achieve results, and win for over 15 years. Welcome, Bo, and thank you so much for joining us again.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for having me. I'm glad to be here, and I'm always happy to sit on a panel with three amazing women who have worked on statehood for so long.
Definitely feel you on that. So yeah, please, last time you sort of spoke a little bit about the updates of statehood with the passing the first recent introduction of statehood in June, I believe, and sort of the process of how that was working out to be. How this time around, given all of the events that have occurred, and with having just barely Democratic majority, what do you think our hopes of statehood, just from your perspective, are you much more hopeful? Do you think there's more avenues for statehood? We've talked a little bit about bypassing filibuster and getting enough votes in the Senate. What do you feel, just generally speaking, do you feel more hopeful? And if so, what do you think is the best way that we can achieve statehood?
Sure, thanks. We're in the best position for statehood that we've been in since the issue started in 1801, and I don't say that lightly. It is last June 26th was the first time that it passed the House of Representatives. It's obviously the first step. And we now sit with a majority in the Senate and the House who have indicated, at least within the party platform, that they support the issue of DC statehood. We also have really strong allies in the vice president and the president, and most importantly, among the administration officials in general. It's not just the president and the vice president. I can point to Ambassador Susan Rice, who's a huge supporter and proponent of statehood, who sits as domestic policy advisor for the president now. We have seen over the last year more and more awareness of statehood because of things that have happened in the district. But that hasn't completely moved the needle. The needle has moved as people have understood that this is a civil rights issue. This is an issue of white supremacy. This is an issue of oppression. And this is an issue of ending 200 and more years of selective exclusion from democracy. That's what's really moved the needle. The other items, whether it is what happened in just outside the White House when the former president went for a walk to a church, to the helicopters hovering in our streets below the tops of buildings, to what happened on January 6th. Those were the moments that built somebody looking into the issue. But what's really important is once people learned about the issue, is they stayed in favor of statehood. That it wasn't just a flashpoint. It wasn't just a moment of panic or a moment of fear. This is now building a long-standing narrative in favor of DC statehood. And that's why I am optimistic. We're absolutely going to have to do something about the filibuster. There are multiple ways around it, whether it is that Leader Schumer eliminates it for all legislation, which is possible, or he eliminates it simply for the admission of states, which is also possible. Statehood is mentioned in a different part of the Constitution than his legislation, so there's absolutely reason he could do that. To whether or not it could be done through reconciliation. I don't totally agree with Stasha on that one. I think there is a small sliver of possibility. I don't think it's a big one, but it's possible. And so there are multiple paths to the Senate. But what we know is that most important is we have to get to 50 votes in support of statehood before we even deal with how do we get it through the Senate. If we don't have a majority, we know that Leader Schumer is not going to go out on a limb and do any of those really sort of bold things that need to be done. And so a lot of people have asked how they can get involved and how they can get active. And it really is about reaching out into the states. There are Democrats and Republicans alike who are targets who should be talked to. Those range from Maine to Alaska, literally. And once we get to 50 votes in support, then we can really start pressing on what is the pathway through the Senate. We're going to see hearings coming up shortly in the House. Sometime in March, we think, not confirmed yet, but we think. And from there, we'll move it out of the House and into the Senate, and that's when we'll really start to pound on folks. I'm going to agree with what Stasha said about Arizona. There was somebody on from Arizona. You are key to this issue, and we need you to get involved because both Senator Sinema and Senator Kelly are not on board yet. If you're in Maine, it's both Collins and King. If you're in West Virginia, it is Senator Manchin. There's plenty of opportunities around the country. So I am super optimistic with the caveat that there's a ton of work to do, and we're going to need folks like Our Revolution and all the other organizations working together on it.
Thank you so much, Bo. Definitely, we are gaining traction on the issue, and we intend to keep pushing it for as long as we can. So you talked a little bit about your organization, DC Vote. Can you, in our last call, can you talk a little bit about updates with what you guys are trying to do? If you're working on any campaigns or any initiatives that we can be a part of now.
Yep, I'm going to put it in. I put it in the chat once before. I'm going to do it again. It's our action website. It's called showupfordc.com. We are working on stuff around the country and in the district. One of the biggest things is if you live in the district now, if you are presently in the district, we are trying to expand the visibility of statehood and get lawn signs all over the country, all over the city, sorry, as well as pole signs and such. So that's one little thing you can do if you live in the district. If you live outside of the district, showupfordc.com has ways that you can contact your elected officials and do letters to the editor, do op-eds, all kinds of things that are going to be key to changing the minds. Whether or not you're in a target state, we need to increase awareness around the country. So wherever you live outside of the district, we really need your help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Will. And something that I actually did not consider is yard signs, just like you would have one for a political candidate or for other issues. I think the importance of trying to bring awareness to people that don't live in DC is a really great idea and something that we should definitely push for along with your other efforts as well. So thank you so much for that. So Diego, do we have any questions for Bo?
As of right now, I think there is a question. How are DC residents able to support your organization in specifically, Bo?
Yep. Like I mentioned, it's the action website is the best way to get involved, and that is showupfordc.org. Sorry, I said it wrong. Showupfordc.com, and we did put it in the chat. And that, like I said, however you want to get involved, there's ways to do it there. It is also a great place to keep up on like the latest news and some talking points on how to talk about statehood with your friends. But ultimately, what we really need is people to engage their own networks. Whether we're talking, I mean, we're on Facebook Live, so everybody here, a lot of folks here have social networks. And that's the way that you can influence folks around the country, is to reach out, post stuff on your social media, share the graphics that we put up, and help educate across the country.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And actually,
consider a JPEG or something, basically a digital lawn sign, and get them up all over the country.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Bo. And actually, just to piggyback on that, you mentioned social media is also a really great tool to bring about awareness. Do you think it's valuable for us local residents to reach out to the media, like traditional press media or local newspapers, to bring awareness? I know some of the more mainstream media outlets have brought some attention to statehood because of recent events, like even ones like NPR, and the local ones like Washington Post. So do you think there's any value to that?
Yeah, I mean, anytime the issue of statehood gets talked about, it's a benefit to the issue. And I'll be completely honest on that. We've done message testing, and whether or not the opposition is presented or not, when people hear about DC statehood, they move in favor of DC statehood. So it is literally one of these instances where there is no bad press. And so if you have relationships with local press, especially if your friends and family around the country have relationships with local press in other places, There are tools on the Show Up website that you can use to generate that kind of coverage in traditional media as well as in social media.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, actually, yeah, that was the clarification that I think some of us wanted, is that would it be more helpful or hurtful to bring attention to more traditional media? So thank you for answering that question.
Yep.
Yeah. So that is all for our questions. Thank you so much again, Bo, for joining us today. And thank you for all of your work with Statehood. And we really, really appreciate you closing out our awesome panel today.
Thanks again for having us. We're always happy to be here.
Of course. So yeah, that is we're going to wrap it up now, guys. It is we are a bit over time, but we really appreciate everyone for joining us today, for all the speakers and all the attendees that were here today, and to hear everyone's perspectives on statehood and how we can bring about awareness for it and to fight for it. And I just wanted to sort of bring it home to our little organization, of which I'm the chair of, Our Revolution DC. We are actually we are trying to gain more members for our particular chapter. So if you are in the DC and want to get more involved with our fight for statehood, as well as fighting for other progressive issues such as Medicare for all and rent control and other progressive issues that we are facing and trying to work for. And if you also want to help us elect progressive candidates, because we also, a lot of the work that we do is endorse progressive candidates and help them get elected to our council and to other positions as well. Please join us at our next chapter meeting. That's going to be on Sunday, February 28th at 1 p.m. We're looking for members to join, as well as leaders, members to join our leadership team as well. So if you're interested in being a part of our committees, like our endorsement committee, or steering our chapter, please just leave your email in our chat, and I'll add you on our email list, and you can get email updates from me and from our steering committee as well, regarding the events that we do, that we help National with, and the events that we do ourselves, and our chapter meetings, and our efforts to help our progressive candidates and issues in DC. So please, if you are interested, put your email in the chat and we will add you. And with that, I will turn it over to Hal to wrap up our call. He just has a few more calls to action from the national side. So Hal, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Topeka. And what a great hour plus that was. And certainly we didn't give our guests probably even as much time as we could have. And many folks would have wanted to hear, but we do have to move on. But I was just so impressed with the representative, of course, Eleanor Holmes Norton, and moving right through to having Stasha Rhodes. Really excited to have her on. She was, of course, featured in the Washington Post. And then Anise Jenkins and Bo Shuff are good friends and allies in the statehood movement. Thank you so much, Topeka, as well, Diego and Zach, for supporting this call. We do want you to tell Biden no EduDebt. I'm just going to put that in right there. No more student debt. It is just not right. It's just not fair. It's talk about equity issues. If you're from a wealthy family or even an affluent family, you start with an enormous advantage. You don't have often, as I said earlier, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So please take that call to action and tell Biden no EduDebt. Also, you see on the screen now our membership drive. I've been talking about that quite a lot. We definitely want you to join as a sustaining member. You hear me typing rrev.us/DC. So DC gets the credit mem for member. And I loved what Topeka did there at the end, where she's saying, hey, folks, we've got a meeting. It's not just about listening to us. It's not even about hearing great speakers like Representative Norton. It's about joining together, planning, strategizing how we together can make a difference. This chapter, I want to say, just before we're a relatively new, young chapter. We started going about 2 years ago. And, or was it one? Maybe it was 2019. And we had such great meetings, very well attended. People were really involved and excited. And then the COVID really stopped, of course, our gathering together. So we're gathering virtually, but we will be getting, I believe, with the vaccine, we'll be together again soon at some of the great libraries around the district. And so please come to the meeting this Sunday virtually. We'll be sending out emails or it's not this Sunday, I'm sorry, a week from Sunday, the 28th. We'll be sending out emails to everyone on this call. You definitely want to be part of that. You will have a voice. And that is what I think we all really, really want. Okay, more calls to action. Yep, Senator Nina Turner, ourrev.us, call for Nina. I'll go really quickly. We are phone banking for Karen Carter Peterson. Just go to ourrevolution.com for more information about this Louisiana House of Representatives candidate whom we've endorsed, Karen Carter Peterson, KCP. Sign up, pass the minimum wage, cancel student debt, no edu-debt. We keep talking about that. And then this Monday, our Organized to Win phone call. We have those every Monday night. They're a lot of fun. They're really exciting. Every now and then, if you join, you'll even get to see and hear me host. And then we have our Nina Turner fundraiser a week from today, 7:30 to 8:30 p.m., Our Revolution, Maryland. And you can get that at the ourrevolution.com site as well. Or just go to ourrevolutionmd.com or lots of Facebook pages. And I think that brings us to the end of the call. So we're going to do a quick, when we organize, we win chant. I'll say when we organize, please unmute if you can. And I'll say when we organize, you'll say we win. I'll say, well, let's do it 3 times. When we organize, we win. When we organize, by the way, I love John Pincus yelling in the chat, we win. When we organize, we win. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you all so much. Thanks for being on the call. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.